Hi, this is our COGS 108 final project, and we are analyzing Marvel movie ratings. Our research question is, how do variables like budget, character inclusion, and box office revenue impact the Rotten Tomato scores of Marvel movies?
This research examines how factors like budget, character inclusion, and box office revenue impact these scores. Prior Kaggle projects have analyzed Marvel's box office trends and audience reception, highlighting relationships between production metrics and ratings. Building on these insights, our study focuses on uncovering what drives critical acclaim for Marvel films.
For our hypothesis, we predict that there is a relationship between the budget for production, character screen time, box office revenue, and the Rotten Tomatoes ratings of Marvel movies.
Our first dataset includes box office information, release dates, ratings, budget, and gross revenue, aimed at analyzing factors influencing a movie's financial success. Our second dataset features box office information such as international, worldwide, domestic, and inflation-adjusted revenue, along with integer-based ratings from other platforms like IMDb. While we only had two main datasets that we wanted to work with, both of them held all of the information that we needed to research our question. In this slide, we are showing a couple examples of ways that we merged and cleaned the data, some of which included renaming or dropping columns, imputing the missing data with real data, and standardizing the column names to maintain consistency. We then used this merged data frame to perform the rest of our project's data analysis.
For our first EDA, we are comparing the variables of budget and Rotten Tomato score to see if there's a relationship between the two. While performing EDA, we saw there were two variables of budget, the first being the original budget and second being the inflation-adjusted budget, which normalizes each film's budget to a common baseline, accounting for inflation. We prefer using this variable because it gives a fair comparison across the different years of when these films were released. Our findings from the OLS regression show that our p-value is approximately 0, which is less than a critical value of 0.05, which shows that our variable of inflation-adjusted budget is statistically significant, meaning that these results are not likely to be due to chance alone. And on the right, you can see a scatter plot of our variables and a positive regression line indicating a positive relationship between inflation-adjusted budget and tomato meter. This is also supported by calculating a Pearson coefficient, which is 0.48, which shows a moderate positive relationship.
For our second EDA, we analyzed the relationship between the appearance of certain characters and their Rotten Tomato ratings. So the graph on the left shows the top 10 characters in their screen time in proportion to the others in the narrowed down top 10 tomato rated movies. And from here, we can narrow down the top characters in terms of the most minutes and the most movies appeared, which would end up being Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. And once deducing this in terms of highest appearance, we compare the ratings of the movies that they are in. And using the p-test correlation, we concluded there's no specific difference in the ratings and the presence of these characters. So therefore, no explicit correlation overall between popular screen characters and the way the critics perceive them.
For our third EDA, we analyzed the relationship between box office revenue and tomato meter. The graph on the left is a scatter plot with adjusted box office revenue on the x-axis and tomato meter on the y-axis. As box office revenue increases, tomato meter also increases, and the Pearson coefficient of 0.62 supports this as it reveals a moderately positive relationship between the two variables. The OLS regression model on the right-hand side introduces release year as a third factor. Our goal in this analysis was to determine whether or not tomato meter trends exist across time. Our conclusions of the regression analysis showed that although there is a statistically significant relationship between box office revenue and tomato meter, time does not appear to have a meaningful effect on influencing tomato meter.
So for a conclusion, we predicted that there's a relationship between budget for production, character screen time, box office revenue, and the Rotten Tomato ratings of Marvel movies. When we conducted EDA, we found that there's no correlation between movie character screen time and tomato meter scores. However, there's a modern positive correlation between budgets and tomato meter scores, as well as between box office revenues and tomato meter scores. We conclude that the budget and box office revenues have the greatest influence on Rotten Tomato scores for Marvel movies. Larger budgets enable better production quality, including advanced visual effects, engaging storytelling, and overall execution. Similarly, box office revenues are a key metric of a movie's broad appeal and franchise success. These factors combine to create films that not only resonate with fans but also earn the approval of critics, leading to higher Rotten Tomatoes scores.